welcome. They've been watching you for a long time, not out of love, out of confusion, out of that quiet discomfort people feel when someone doesn't move the way the world trained them to move. You notice it before anyone says anything, the way eyes linger a second too long, the pauses that stretch when you enter a room, the smiles that look polite but feel unfinished, like they're hiding a question they don't know how to ask. You don't announce yourself, you don't demand attention, and yet, something about your presence pulls focus without effort. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when you blended in more, when you reacted the way people expected, when you laughed at the right moments, explained yourself when things felt awkward, filled silence, so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. You learned early how to read the room, how to adjust your tone, how to become acceptable. But somewhere along the way that changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. Pressure did it. Misunderstanding did it. The kind of isolation that doesn't come from being alone, but from being unseen while surrounded by people. You went through moments where explaining yourself felt pointless, where reacting only created more noise, where the safest place to stand was inside yourself. So you stopped performing, and that's when they started watching. At first, they thought you were distant, maybe cold. They told themselves stories to make sense of your stillness, because stillness makes people uneasy. Silence forces reflection, and reflection isn't comfortable for everyone. It reveals things they'd rather keep buried under conversation and distraction. They tried to read you like everyone else, to map your behavior, to predict your responses. But you didn't follow the familiar patterns. You didn't rise when provoked. You didn't collapse when ignored. You didn't chase validation or recoil from criticism. You stayed centered, and that's what confused them. Most people live in reaction. Push here, they push back. Praise here, they lean in. Ignore here, they panic. It's not a flaw, it's conditioning. But when someone steps out of that loop, when they pause instead of react, when they observe instead of perform, it disrupts the rhythm everyone else is unconsciously following. You became that disruption. Not because you wanted to be different, but because you learned something fundamental. Not everything deserves a response. Not every emotion needs to be broadcast. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Silence, you discovered, isn't empty. It's selective. You began using it not as a shield, but as a filter, letting what mattered reach you and allowing the rest to fall away. And with each choice not to react, something inside you stabilized. Your nervous system learned a new language, one of regulation instead of reactivity. People felt that before they understood it, they started projecting onto you, calling you mysterious, intense, hard to read. Some mistook your calm for arrogance. Others mistook it for weakness. Both were wrong. What they were sensing was discipline, emotional containment, the ability to hold yourself steady without leaning on external approval. That kind of self-mastery doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain. It simply exists, and existence like that acts like a mirror. When people look at you, they don't just see you, they see themselves reflected back. Their impatience next to your patience, their noise next to your quiet, their need to be seen next to your comfort with being grounded. And not everyone likes what they see. That's why curiosity turns into fascination, and fascination for some turns into quiet obsession. They watch how you move, how you speak less but say more, how you don't rush to fill gaps in conversation, how you seem unaffected by the very things that shake them. They replay interactions in their mind, wondering what they missed, searching for cracks in your calm, looking for proof that you're pretending. But there is nothing to uncover, because your stillness isn't an act, It's earned. It came from nights where you learned to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, from moments where you chose restraint over release, from realizing that attention doesn't equal connection and that being watched doesn't mean being understood. You stopped living to be decoded by others. You started living to understand yourself. And that's when everything shifted. Your presence began influencing spaces without effort. Conversations slowed around you. People became more aware of their words. Some felt safer. Others felt exposed. You didn't change your behavior to create this effect. You simply stopped diluting yourself. Silence followed you into rooms, not as absence, but as weight. A fullness that made noise feel unnecessary. You didn't need to assert boundaries loudly because your energy already communicated them. This unsettled those who rely on chaos to feel alive. They mistook your distance for disinterest, not realizing it was clarity. You weren't pulling away to punish anyone. You were stepping back to see clearly, to protect your focus, to conserve your energy. You learned that not everyone deserves access to you, and that realization refined your world. Connections became fewer but deeper. Interactions became slower but more honest. You no longer chased being liked. You valued being aligned. And alignment does something strange. It removes urgency. You stopped needing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped proving your worth in rooms that couldn't hold it. You allowed others to sit with their assumptions instead of correcting them. That's when they started feeling it more strongly. The ones addicted to noise felt powerless around you. The ones who thrived on reaction couldn't hook into you anymore. Provocation met neutrality, drama met observation, and without resistance to push against, their energy collapsed inward. They called you unpredictable. But that wasn't true. You were precise. You moved with intention, not impulse. You spoke when it mattered. You listened when others talked to fill space. You understood that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most secure. Your calm wasn't passive. It was strategic. You knew when to move, when to stay still, when to disengage, when to let curiosity do the work for you. You didn't need to chase attention because attention naturally follows coherence. And still, you didn't seek to dominate or control. That's the part they never understood. You weren't trying to be powerful, you were trying to be whole. That wholeness changed how you were remembered. People carried conversations with you longer than they expected. They replayed moments of silence, searching for meaning, not because you withheld, but because you didn't overgive. Distance became your clarity, not your wall. You stopped translating yourself into versions others could misuse. You existed as you were, trusting that only those capable of meeting you at that level would remain. And without effort, your presence began filtering your world. This is where the watching intensified, not because they hated you, but because you reminded them of something they lost: peace, self-control. Depth, the ability to sit with themselves without distraction. Your stillness exposed how dependent they were on noise. And exposure feels like confrontation to those who avoid themselves. They tried to label you to regain control. Intense, cold, detached. Each label revealed more about their frustration than your reality. Because labels are what people use when they can't access something directly. Your presence didn't ask for respect. It commanded it quietly, not through fear, through consistency. Through the unmistakable calm of someone who has been tested and didn't fracture. Someone who learned to regulate instead of retaliate. Someone who discovered that true influence doesn't shout. It hums, slow, steady, unavoidable. And here's the truth. They never say out loud. The more they watch you, the more they realize they're watching what they could have been if they'd chosen awareness over avoidance. Your calm becomes a reminder. Your silence becomes a question they don't want to answer. That's why some drift away. Not because you're harsh, but because you're honest. Because truth can't coexist with masks forever. You didn't ask to become a mirror. Life made you one. Every disappointment polished it. Every betrayal clarified it. Every moment you chose restraint over reaction strengthened it. And now when people stand in front of you, they feel seen even if you say nothing. That's what makes them nervous. You don't absorb their chaos anymore. You don't carry what isn't yours. You reflect it back cleanly without judgment, and reflection is uncomfortable for those still running. They try to test you to provoke a reaction, to break your rhythm, but each attempt only reveals their lack of it. Because freedom unnerves those addicted to control. You've reached a place where everything either aligns with your peace or exits your path. And that's not loss, it's refinement. You're no longer searching for validation in others. You've become anchored within yourself. And this is still not the end. This is only the middle of the shift, the point where your presence has stabilized, but the world is still adjusting to it, where your calm has become unmistakable, but its full impact hasn't finished unfolding yet. They'll keep watching, not to understand you, but because something about you reminds them of what they've been avoiding all along. And this story, it's still continuing. As time passes, the watching doesn't stop. It simply changes shape. It becomes quieter, less obvious. No longer the sideways glances or open curiosity. Instead, it turns into something subtler, a heightened awareness when you're near, a careful choice of words, a hesitation before people speak, as if they're measuring themselves against a standard they didn't realize existed until you walked into the space. You feel it, even when no one admits it. You've learned to sense shifts before they become visible. The way energy tightens in a room, the way conversations adjust their pace, the way people suddenly become more aware of their tone, their posture, their intent. You don't cause this deliberately. You're not trying to unsettle anyone. It happens because you are no longer fragmented. Most people carry themselves in pieces. One version for approval, one for defense, one for survival, one for image. They switch between them constantly, often without noticing the strain it creates. But you've integrated. You're no longer switching masks every few minutes. What they see is what's there. And it's also confronting. You've noticed that some people lean toward you, drawn to the calm you carry. They feel steadier around you, as if your presence gives their nervous system permission to slow down with you. They don't feel rushed to perform. They don't feel pushed to impress. They feel regulated. Others react differently. They become restless, defensive, overly talkative. They fill the space with words because silence feels too revealing. Your quiet doesn't judge them, but it invites awareness, and awareness is uncomfortable when someone has been avoiding themselves for a long time. You see both responses clearly now, and you no longer take either personally. There was a time when you would have adjusted yourself to ease that discomfort. You would have softened your stillness, added unnecessary explanations, made jokes to dissolve tension. You thought it was kindness. You thought it was connection. Now you understand it was self-abandonment. You don't do that anymore? You've learned that true connection doesn't require you to shrink. It requires resonance, and resonance only happens when you're honest about who you are in the moment. Calm, focused, present. Not distant, just grounded. That grounding has changed how you move through challenges as well. When tension arises now, you don't immediately prepare for impact. You don't brace yourself the way you used to. You pause. You assess. You notice what belongs to you and what doesn't. This alone has saved you more energy than anything else you've learned. You don't absorb other people's anxiety anymore. You don't mistake their urgency for your responsibility. You don't confuse their discomfort with your failure. You've learned to let reactions pass through you instead of lodging inside you. That doesn't make you uncaring. It makes you precise. You still feel deeply. You still empathize. But empathy no longer means carrying what isn't yours. It means understanding without merging, witnessing without drowning, supporting without self-erasure. This is why some people don't know where they stand with you anymore. You're warm, but not porous. Open, but not exposed, available, but not endlessly accessible. For those used to blurred boundaries, this feels unfamiliar. They call it distance. You call it clarity. You've also noticed how much quieter your internal world has become. Not empty, just orderly. Thoughts arise and pass without fighting each other for attention. Emotions move through without hijacking your direction. You don't suppress, you regulate. That regulation gives you something powerful: choice. You choose when to speak. You choose when to engage. You choose, and because your choices aren't driven by fear or validation, they land differently. People feel the finality of them even when you say very little. You don't threaten, you don't announce boundaries, you embody them. That embodiment changes the dynamic instantly. Some test it, they push, subtly. At first, a comment here, a provocation there. They're looking for the old version of you, the one who would explain, defend, overextend. When they don't find it, confusion sets in. They mistake your restraint for calculation. They mistake your calm for strategy. What they don't see is that there's no game being played. You're simply no longer operating from chaos. You've realized that the need to be understood by everyone is a trap. That explanation doesn't always bring clarity. Sometimes it just gives people more material to misunderstand you with. So you stopped offering it freely. Not out of spite, out of wisdom. You let action speak. You let consistency speak. You let time reveal what words never could. And over time, that quiet confidence builds a presence that doesn't need reinforcement. People remember how you made them feel more than what you said. And what they feel around you is contrast. Contrast between noise and stillness, between urgency and intention, between reaction and response. That contrast follows them after you leave. They replay, not because you were dramatic, but because you weren't. Your pauses linger, your composure echoes. You didn't give them everything at once, and that restraint made what you did give memorable. You are learning now that influence doesn't come from volume. It comes from coherence. And coherence changes how the world responds to you. Opportunities don't rush you anymore. They arrive with patience. People don't challenge you as often. When they do, it's quieter, more cautious, as if they sense that forcing you would only reveal more about themselves. You also notice how endings have changed. Things don't explode the way they used to. They fade, they resolve. They dissolve naturally when alignment is no longer present. There's less drama, less aftermath, less residue. That's what happens when you stop fighting what's leaving. You trust timing now in a way you never did before. You don't chase momentum, you allow it to build. You don't panic when things slow down. You understand that pauses are part of precision, not punishment. This patience unsettles people too. In a world addicted to immediacy, someone who isn't rushing looks dangerous, unreadable, powerful, not because they control anything, but because they're not controlled by urgency. You've learned to let curiosity do the work for you. Let silence stretch. Let people reveal themselves without interrogation. Let situations unfold without interference. The truth always surfaces when you don't interrupt it, and you've become very comfortable waiting for it. You may have noticed that your circle feels smaller. Now that's not isolation, that's filtration. You no longer bond over chaos, over venting, over shared frustration. You connect through clarity, respect, and mutual presence. This makes some connections impossible to maintain, and you've made peace with that. You understand now that not every bond is meant to survive growth. Some were only meant to get you through a phase. You don't resent them, you release them, and in that release, you gain space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to align even more deeply with yourself. That alignment continues refining you, even when nothing obvious is happening. This is the part most people misinterpret. They think calm means stagnation. They think quiet means nothing is happening. But you know better. You know this is where the real work happens, in the unseen adjustments, in the subtle recalibrations, in the way your body, mind, and intuition are finally working together instead of against each other. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to be right to feel secure, someone who doesn't need to win to feel whole, someone who doesn't need to be loud to be heard. And that changes the trajectory of everything. You don't chase control. You cultivate stability. You don't demand respect. You generate it. You don't seek dominance. You embody self-trust. People who rely on manipulation feel exposed around you. People who thrive on drama feel bored. People who seek depth feel relieved. Each response tells you exactly where they are without you asking a single question. That discernment is one of your greatest strengths now. You no longer wonder why certain people feel uneasy around you. You recognize it immediately. Your presence highlights what's unresolved in them. And that's not your burden to carry. You've stopped absorbing guilt for simply being grounded. This phase you're in is about consolidation, about letting everything you've learned settle into something unshakable. You're not rushing toward a reveal or a reward. You're stabilizing into yourself. And while others are still watching, still guessing, still trying to define what you are, you're moving quietly forward. Not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but to continue living in alignment with the calm you've earned. This story hasn't reached its conclusion yet. It's still deepening, and eventually the watching fades into something else. Not because they understand you, but because you no longer require their attention. You've settled into yourself so fully that curiosity loses its grip. Your calm doesn't need an audience. Your presence doesn't ask permission. You move forward now with quiet certainty, not proving, not reacting, just aligned. What once unsettled others has become your home, and that is where your power rests.